happy December, guys. I know we've been in December for a while, but it's just fun because I'm like, man, we are almost to the end of 2018. And this year has been a wild, wild ride with the launch of long-term mentorship, with hitting a ton of milestones for the podcast. We're up to like 70 episodes now. We are killing it. And next year, guys, we're just putting out content. Like, people are not going to be able to catch up on the backlog. It's going to be insane. And we're doing new things with the show notes. So I am just super excited. But I'm also excited to have a little bit of a break and take some time off for the holiday and Christmas break before, for me, we have 3 or 4 weddings in January. So we're just going to keep on pushing and keep on going. So really excited for that. But this episode is going to be geared to people who are going into a non-busy season, maybe you have a month off, or you have a few weeks where things are just a little bit lighter for you as we've come out of a heavy season. And so this is something we're talking about, publishing and getting submitted or submitting to get published for your weddings. And so what that basically means is that an outlet, like Style Me Pretty or The Knot, or even local ones to your area, or smaller ones like Catalyst and stuff like that, are going to feature your weddings. And one, they're going to link back to you, which is really good for SEO. And it's awesome. And then 2, this is something that doesn't cost you any money. It just costs you time. I'm a big fan of those things that just require sweat equity. And so that way you can write up your emails, you can get all the information that you need that they're looking for, and you can submit. And so one of my favorite friends who is just really good at this, and I thought it'd be fun to kind of like jive with her and have her expertise on, is Liz Fogarty. And she's out of DC. And so I love her. She's awesome. She's got really good style, but she's also just really good at getting submitted and getting published. And so she's been featured on like Martha Stewart and The Knot and Style Me Pretty, and even like the front page of our local, it's like the biggest wedding magazine in our area here in DC. It's called Washingtonian Magazine. And so she's even been on the front page of that, which is really, really cool. So she's a boss. And so I wanted to have her on and just kind of walk through like the guide for dummies of how to get published and how to submit. And she's got a course coming out, which is really, really cool. And I think there's not a lot of resources on that in our industry. And so 1, this podcast will be super good and super helpful. And then 2, I would definitely reach out to her and ask about her course, because she's just like, she's got the knowledge and she's done it. Like, she's been featured in like huge spots, which is really, really cool. So we're talking to her. It's going to be really, really fun. She's a spitfire. She's from Brazil. So I love it. Without any further ado, here is Elizabeth. Elizabeth, how's it going?
Hey, Adam, it's good to hear from you. Thank you so much for having us. Everything is good. We're just trying to survive the fall season, like all photographers. How about you?
Going all right. Fall is pretty crazy, but also too, it's a lot of my friends and people listen to the podcast are like, hey, so things are winding down for you. And I'm like, my next 3 weeks of travel are kind of insane. And I did this to myself, but
I know we do. And they're like, what have I done to myself?
Yeah. You asked me, I thought you were going to say like, how's the fall, or like surviving the fall. And I thought it was like an actual fall. And I was like, oh man, like I didn't hear that happened.
Oh, you're like, oh gosh, no. I mean, the fall for photographers. It's literally crazy. And then you have people emailing and it's like, oh, I need family pictures. You're like, there is no way I can fit this right now.
Right, totally. I'm just like, no, it's a weird thing to explain, because like when you're starting out,
it is.
I even tell people like, take as much as you can, like as long as your family is okay and you're trying to pay bills, like do what you got to do. But eventually, it's like, I don't know. It's like when you go into Starbucks, and I'm guilty of this. I'll be like, hey, can you make me a chocolate milk? And they're like, sometimes they're like, really, dude? And, it's not on the menu. It's not something I could do, but they have the ingredients right there to make it. But
that's true.
Yeah. It's the same thing for photographers. You're like, hey, this is not my time, or it's not worth the value that you're trying to get.
It is. It's just, And just like, just for wedding photographers, I think our goal is to get like our couples pictures back, like for weddings. So there's no way it's harder for us to pick up family when how long it takes to edit a wedding and export and get it out perfectly. So I always try to be focused during wedding season.
Totally. No, it's a weird thing. And like, this was the first year that we did like a really big Black Friday push. And
nice.
I felt bad though. And I realized that I didn't have to feel bad, but I had like couples who got married like the week before Thanksgiving, and they said, "Hey, are we going to be able to enjoy this Black Friday deal?" And I said, "No, but I'll include something in your gallery, like as a gift."
That's nice. I get it. Yeah. That makes sense.
And then I said, but also like next year you'll be able to enjoy the Black Friday deal.
There
So it's
you
kind of
go.
one, accountability for me, like, hey, you better do this, boy. And then two, like she, like my brides can take advantage of that too, so they don't feel like left out. But it was a weird like business thing, like, or like my December couples, they can't enjoy the Black Friday deal either until next year.
That's
so I'm like,
true.
but I'm like, whatever.
Right. You're like, hey, next year it's going to be around, and that's good accountability for you, and it makes them look forward towards that too. So it's good. It's like a win-win.
Yeah, exactly. Like if Target had a Lego Star Wars set deal, which I've never bought any Legos in my life for myself, but if that was a thing, then I'd be like, all right, well, I just gotta wait until Black Friday next year. But anyway, I'm sure we could talk forever. So tell me a little bit about you and Gavin. I know you shoot together a lot, and your story, how you got started. You're based in DC, one of our DC colleagues, but you've been in business for a while, it seems like. And I just want to know a little bit about your story, like how you got started, where did you come from, where did you go, et cetera, all that stuff.
Oh yeah. So pretty much I'm actually a biochemistry major, which is pretty crazy. My parents only like started taking me seriously like 2 years ago. They're like, go back to school, get a master's. What the heck are you doing? My brother is in medical school at Hopkins, just as a comparison for you. So I am like that person of the family, but obviously I love what I do. I'm very grateful. So pretty much I got a biochemistry degree. I got into pharmacy school, and I ended up not going to pharmacy and taking a break. During that break, I got married, and we bought a dog, a little puppy, Oodles, and I bought a camera to take pictures of Oodles, and the rest is history. So I fell in love with it, and I'm very focused. Like when I want something, I give 100% of my time and everything, and I can't imagine doing anything else now.
That is awesome. How long ago did you buy that camera and I guess purchase the dog as well?
So it's about 6 years ago. So I started shooting about 6 years ago, and in full time for 5 years.
That is awesome. I love that. Now, where does this like sense of medical, like, it seems like all your family chose like the longest education professions, if you will. Yeah. Like, what does that come from? Are they just really smart? Are they really just love hard work? How does that work for you?
So, yes, I mean, my family is incredibly smart. My brother is very smart. I'm very proud of him. But actually, we moved here from Brazil in 98. So it's just the hard work. My brother and I just loved school. My mom was a house cleaner. My dad was a driver to put us, through college, and they worked very hard. So we just have that sense of like hard work. And so we don't come from like doctors or lawyers or anything. So it's just kind of funny. We're just like very proud of our parents and how hard they worked.
That is awesome. Your parents are badasses.
They are. Awesome. So we're very, very proud of them, and we're very blessed. God has really blessed us. So we're very grateful to be where we are.
That is incredible. I love that. And if you don't mind sharing, like, where in DC do you guys live? Do you live in the district or outside of DC?
We live right outside of DC.
That's awesome. That's super cool.
It is. And it's nice because it allows us to like shoot, we are primarily DC, but also we love to travel. Like we do Annapolis, we do Baltimore, we do Eastern Shore. We also do like some destination weddings a year. So it's kind of cool to like be able to shoot in different places too.
I love that. So what does your guys' workload look like for you each year? Kind of how many weddings do you kind of love to kind of keep to that number? And, do you shoot anything else? And I know that you're trying to get into the education space. So what does it all look like for you?
Yeah, so we try to stick between 15 to 20 weddings. That's kind of like the perfect number for us. And like I love to teach. I love to have these online courses. So I've been trying to, focus on them a little bit more too. How many weddings do you guys shoot? I've always been curious.
Yeah, so we've never had a cap.
Okay, good.
Ironically, until next year where we learned that we should have a cap. So we 2 years ago we shot 19 weddings, and we were very satisfied and had.
That's awesome.
Like I had a bunch of corporate work coming in, and I was shooting some international work for nonprofits that I like. So I was just very content. We weren't like rolling in the Benjamins or anything like that, but we were very content.
Exactly.
Able to pay bills, etc. And so the next year I was like, you know what, it'd be really cool because I always feel like I'm trying to grow, even though people think that you're done. I'm like, no, I want to see what the next goal is. And so I was like, my heroes shoot like 60, 70 weddings a year.
Oh my gosh,
I was like, if I could shoot 25, I'll raise my prices and try to just be, still be good about it. But I would love to shoot 25. And out of nowhere, we ended up shooting like 39 weddings the next year.
Wow, that's legit. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was a good learning experience to go from 19 to 40 or whatever, or 39. And, you do get to meet more couples. And the one thing I do love about like high volume is it helps build your like referral network, because you're shooting at like 20 venues a year or 30 venues a year. And you have 30. I always say that if there's 100 guests at every wedding, that's 2,000 people or 4,000 people that you can like dive into and get to know. So that's really cool. And this year we did 43 weddings. We actually
you guys are awesome. You guys are rock stars.
Yeah. We were just kind of like, all right, we'll see where this goes. We'll try and shoot like 40. And again, we did all the things that you're supposed to do to not have that growth, and it's still happening. So we think we have like a good idea of like who our market is in DC, and it's been really, really fun. But we're hoping next year to only do 30.
That's a good number.
We're trying to ramp down and just see where that works. And sorry, this is a really long answer to your question. And
does your wife shoot with you?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
Yeah, she wants nothing to do anything with the business at all.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm always like, hey, do you want a job? And like, I don't know if you've looked into it for Gavin. I mean, you probably have, but like the tax break for having a family member work for you. Once you find that out, it explains everything about family-owned businesses. You're like, oh, like the United States, like it rewards family-owned businesses, at least small ones. And I was like,
does it really?
Yeah. So I was like, babe, you have to do this. And she was like, no, I want nothing to do with that. So I was like, all right, that's fine. But she's getting her second master's right now. She's yeah, she's a nerd and she's awesome. So
that's awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, people always ask like, is Gavin gonna like go full time? I'm like, heck no. First of all, Gavin is my healthcare. You don't play with healthcare nowadays. So,
what does Gavin do?
So Gavin is a firefighter paramedic.
What? That's awesome.
I know. So but he has a really good schedule. So he's been able to come to all my weddings. Like his job is awesome. Like it really is. He has a legit job.
That is super cool. That's super cool. Awesome. So we talked about this a little bit beforehand, but talked about how you're like a boss babe at getting published. And that's like the coin turn, if you will. I think there's a podcast called Boss Babe, but
it is.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. But so I kind of know a little bit about submitting, but it was one of those things that I like stumbled into. And I feel like a lot of photographers, if they don't know that they care about it, then they don't care about it until they're like, oh, I should really do this thing. So walk me through a little bit about your story, because you've been published in like some big spots, and that's really fun for a photographer, and your work is awesome. So like, just walk me through a little bit, like what was it like to get your first feature, and like, how did that work?
I mean, it's great. For my first feature, actually, I mean, Adam, you're talking about like, it was a stout shoot I put on with friends, with like things from my friend's mom's basement. Like, it's hilarious. But it's awesome. I think getting published is great to see your work on a blog or a magazine. And then just like when I got that first like Stabby Pretty wedding, like I couldn't believe it. So it's just great because it's free marketing. So for photographers getting published, like I get it. It can be a little overwhelming and scary, like what to do. But at the end of the day, like it's someone showing your work for free.
Yeah. And it's usually like outlets of varying sizes, but almost all of them, even smaller named wedding websites, are bigger than your own website, like it doesn't hurt.
Exactly. It does not hurt. And even like niche or local blogs are great too, because national ones, obviously they have like a great following and it's great for exposure. But I think for brides who are really like, for you to convert brides, I think local and niche ones are great because like brides are looking like at the, Washingtonian Magazine or the Washingtonian blog, and they know that you're in DC. So that's like kind of like a win-win.
Right. It's like the authority comes from the national, but then they like, let me dive in to them further. It's like when they see you on the local one and they're like, oh, okay, this is like a vendor that's worked at a, spot that I like.
Exactly.
Or
like, and like you said, like they see that you've worked at the venue that maybe she's getting married at or a venue that they're looking at. So it's really good to like create credibility and like build that trust.
That's awesome. And I mean, it gives, at least for me on the nerdy side, it gives you a lot of SEO boost. Like that's a big deal. Like it can take your website, one backlink is super valuable. And then if you kind of make it a habit to, get published often. I know for us, we try to submit every wedding, even if we don't feel like it's a killer, just to try, like what we kind of have like our systems down. And like I have this like auto generated email, that like makes it happen and kind of gives everybody the information they need. So I try to submit every wedding.
That's awesome. Good for you. I mean, and I know like I don't submit every wedding. I try to like I try to be like ones that are, kind of like really line up with my brand. But I mean, that's awesome. You're killing it. Because it takes time. Like we know it like takes time to submit weddings.
Yeah, totally. It's one of those things that I've talked about it before where like this is the time of year when most photographers should do it. Like as you come off your fall, like crazy stuff is like, hey, January and February, you should like work on your business and like do some submitting, make sure your site is not broken, like figure out all those things that you've made a list of things to fix. And submitting is one of those cool things that like a lot of us,
really is. When
you deliver your wedding, whether you send over a gallery, or you meet with a couple and try to sell them an album or print sales or something like that, submitting it like, it gives more life to the wedding that you already shot, and it doesn't directly translate into more money or anything like that or more revenue, but it can. It's like it just breathes new life because once you post the blog, like you see the hits and they come on one day and then nothing, and you're like, okay, well that's done. And for people who like to see stuff like work out for them, submitting can be like a really good thing for them.
It is. And like you said, like it's great to have like those winter goals when we're a little bit maybe slowed down, like, updating portfolio on your website, like you said, making sure the website's working. And I think submitting is great because like you said, the SEO is huge, like getting people to show your work and you link into your website or your Instagram accounts, that could be more following too. And that's one thing that we cover in the course is, the difference between being published online or in print. So print is great and it's prestige and it's very hard, but guess what? Online is SEO. Like brides don't share magazine articles, but they share the Instagram post online. So online really is so much more exposure than print.
Wow, I didn't even think about that because it feels baller, right, to have your stuff featured in print. But then you're like, this doesn't help my website at all.
I know. I think it's kind of like the stock market. It's all about diversification, right? You want to get you don't want to be in the same blogs or the same magazines, but you do want to have a good mix of both. But yeah, magazine, I do love it. I think it does make you stand apart. I think it makes you have an authority in the field. And also it's like, prestige because it's, incredibly hard. How many weddings are there a year? And then you count how many real weddings are in one magazine. It's probably like 7 or 8. So obviously like it does set you apart, but guess what? There is no Instagram and there is no website link. So that is and we kind of like talk about the pros and cons of both print and online, but you definitely want to have a good mix of both. But it's funny to think about that because people are like, oh my gosh, magazine. Obviously we love the magazines, but hey, blogs and Instagrams are so good.
Yeah, it's one of those things where even like photography contests and awards and stuff like that. It's one of those things where maybe I'm just not that great of a photographer and I've had to be like, that's okay, whereas like I'm all about the business and serving people and loving people. And, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't have to have like a pissing contest with my competitors.
And I feel like that's kind of like, oh my gosh, I've made it if I've been published. No. If at the end of the day, let's say you have 100,000 Instagram following, but you have no one booking you and you can't even pay your mortgage, you haven't made it.
Yeah.
So there is no such thing as like, I've made it. It does help, sets you apart. It's, free marketing, free exposure, but no, it does not mean that you've made it. There's no such thing. Right.
It's one of the things I love the few times I've been published, but there was this one wedding I shot. It was a destination wedding and it was like one of my first ones ever. And I've not shot that many, but it was great. It was like in Maui. It was a small,
that's legit.
Yeah, it was perfect. And I loved it. The photos went really well. The couple was happy. The family was happy. Like everything was really cool. And people were like, wow, you went to Maui for a wedding. That's so cool.
Yeah.
But the feature, it got featured on the Huffington Post, and what was really funny is like it was compared to now where I like write these long emails and I have all this information and I send it in, that was the easiest. Like it felt like I literally was at a baseball game and somebody sent me a link and they're like, hey, your photos are on the Huffington Post. And I was like, what?
Oh, wow. You're like, what the heck?
Yeah. Like we didn't even really push to that spot. And so it's really funny. Like I love like systematizing things, but this is one of those reasons why it's not as like pride important as more as it's business important. Like you need that backlink, you know?
It is. And I think that's a good way to put it.
That's awesome. So you've been shooting for a long time now and been submitting. Like how I know a lot of photographers, when they have no idea what this comes to. And even myself, I only know a little bit. Like,
okay,
when it comes to submitting, you have to shoot a little bit differently, or at least you have to like include
exactly
things that a lot of people think like, oh, I'm getting featured because of this amazing portrait. But what I've realized is that's not the case for a lot of outlets. Like what do you think they want to see? And like, how does that affect your shooting?
Yeah, so that's like, I think curating the gallery is huge. So it is shooting a little bit more on the editorial side, which is always nice. Like I always do spend time with magazines and see like what would fit the layout. So at the end of the day, you have to think about, and for us, like sometimes like for natural light photographers or for like fine art photographers, sometimes we can get stuck on like shooting details or the pretty little details or the golden hour, the perfect light. Like, yes, those are great, but guess what? Like for you have to curate the gallery well, and the editors need to see, you have to tell a narrative from start, it have a middle and has to have an end. So you can't just show details in portraits, which sometimes I feel like fine art photographers do focus a lot. So editors want to see the ceremony, the guest experience, the reception, the speeches, like the vibe of the energy, the vibe and the energy of the wedding. And I think some photographers make that mistake and they don't know how to curate the gallery and how to pick the images that editors are looking for.
That's super good to know too. It's one of those things that I think people, again, like you said, it's like the story and trying to show like the whole thing, because we, like a lot of my couples, even though my stuff has been featured, some of my couples have never even read a wedding magazine. It's just kind of like your vibe attracts your tribe, right? And
exactly.
It's one of those things where you're like, I always ask them, I'm like, hey, if it's between, details or people, I'm going to choose people every day. But if you if you have something that's important to you and you're still getting your makeup done, like I view that as like free shooting time. Like, okay,
of course.
It's like they call in like basketball games garbage time or something like that. So
yeah, so like, and that's not one thing I usually don't really tell my couples. So I agree with you. I actually arrive an hour early and I shoot on my time when it comes to details, because I agree with you. Like I don't want to be shooting a ring, which obviously the groom picked it out. It's important. It's special to them, but I don't want to be shooting like an invitation suite when the mom and the bride are having a moment. So what I do is I do arrive an hour early on my own time, and that's when I shoot details, because then guess what? I'm not supposed to be here, and I don't feel bad like I'm missing anything out because my time hasn't officially started.
That's awesome. I never even thought about that. That's a pretty baller customer experience move as well.
It is. So like, and on top of that, like, it's just like, hey, arriving early is just good. You know where to park, like you're not stressed. If anything happens, like you're still on time. So for us, it just works with that in terms of like logistics and being on time. But then, hey, I arrived an hour early for details and I'm not even supposed to be here. So I think, yeah, it like counts for the couple. And I can take my time with details, because details are important to me, because I do like to be featured. And I think they're important to my bride too, because like you said, you attract what you show. So because I do show details, they are important to my bride. So it kind of works out.
Right. No, exactly. Like you're going to have people who put a lot of thought into those things.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I mean, yeah, arriving an hour early. That's like the best business tip right there. You're like, guys, you need to submit your weddings, but also arrive a little bit early, especially in DC, because the traffic is insane and parking sucks.
And like for also you like to scout the venue out, all those things. I think it's just, and also like to set yourself, like to settle yourself, like as a photographer, like you kind of have to be in the right mindset. So even like, when I think about shooting weddings, not just for publications for brides and grooms, like just being in the right mindset is so important to be present.
I love that. There's so many times where like I arrive to the wedding early and I'm just like sitting in my car looking at my phone, and then you get that like an email that you're like, dang it, why did I get this stupid email?
No, you can't do it. So like I actually have like playlists for weddings on the way that I listen to like specific stuff to get me like in the right mindset.
That is awesome. You have to send me a link. Funny. That's awesome. That is really, really cool. So tell me more about just a submitting process. If you had to give like a basic guide to what kind of photos to include, like, do you give a link to the whole gallery? Do you make a gallery that's just for featuring that wedding? So you say like, hey, I'm not giving you everything that I gave the couple, but
exactly.
like, how does that work for you, like practically?
Yeah, so practically, and one thing that we share in the course is I share my entire workflow from like importing pictures to culling to like that final gallery. So yeah, we create a gallery just for submission, and we do show like how to create that and how to pick the right images, because your images have to go along with your write-up. So when it comes to submitting, you need both the gallery, which we like to keep between 100 and 150 pictures, because you can't overwhelm the editor either. They don't want to see 1,500 pictures and you have to pick 10. So you're wasting their time and you're not doing a service to them. So we like to keep our gallery between 100 to 150. And then on top of that, that gallery has to go along with the write-up. And the write-up is pretty much the pitch to the editor. It's how you're telling them, hey, this is why you want to pick my wedding over hundreds of other weddings out there. So you want that email to be organized and to be clear to the point. So, and we also do in our course, we share like the exact sample write-up so you can copy and then put in your specifics for your wedding. So like you want to put your vendors and you just want to like pretty much tell the editor why it sets the wedding apart, why it should be chosen.
That's super good. That's something that I wouldn't have even thought of, is, making sure to even have like a different gallery. But it's like when you're submitting your resume to people, they say like it has to be one page. Like even if you're more qualified, like make it one page. And I had a professor in high school who was like, they're only going to read the first half of the first page. So I was like, dang, like we have to win them like very quickly. Like, can I send you donuts with my submission? Like, please, like put it in there.
Yeah, and the same goes for editors. Like, I mean, imagine how many submissions they get a day. You pretty much like, so when it comes to like even that gallery, those first 10 pictures, they have to tell the entire story. So you don't want 10 ring shots. You don't want 10 reception shots. So you want each of the other, like each part of the day. So the editor in their mind can already see a layout with these pictures side by side that they tell clear narrative. And there's that cohesive design.
No, that's super important. Now, is there like, when you're shooting, do you think about, hey, I'm going to submit this wedding. So, we talked about details, but also like, is there like multiple pieces where in your mind you're like, oh, I want them to look like this, like the family formals, if possible, if the weather's good, or you've problem solved the best way you can. Like, what other things are you trying to include, if you will, photo wise?
When it comes to getting featured?
Yeah.
So for us, like one thing we talk about in our course too is like the 90-10 rule. I think 90% of the time I really am shooting for my couples. I am not shooting for the editors or the magazines. So I think my goal really is to work, like my couples are the ones paying my bills. They're the ones that have trusted me with their memories. So like I am there for them. So my priority is my couples at the end of the day. It's not to impress the editor. So, and that's where 10%, so it's like 90-10, and 10 is for me / for getting featured, because that kind of goes in hand for me. And then where it goes, me showing up, an hour early for me to shoot for my own time. But we kind of like have our mental checklist of pictures that you kind of need for submission. But the good thing is that like a lot of these pictures that you need, quote unquote, also tell the wedding day story. So they're also good for the couple. So like you want cocktail hour images where the guests are enjoying their time, which your couple's going to love because that's their guests, the people they love, and they're having a fun time. But then for us, we just know how to shoot that. For example, I would shoot the guests while also showing the design of the wedding. So like you kind of like marry those two, where you're still shooting for your couples who is your priority on that day.
That's awesome. Now, when it comes to, submitting and stuff like that, like how does your relationship to vendors and getting all the vendor information, like what does that process look like for you? And one, like, what if you have a wedding where you're like, oh, that other vendor was just not fun to work with or something like that? It happens every once in a while. Like what is that process like for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think for when it comes to vendors and getting published, obviously they love it because their business is getting free exposure too, and like free marketing through getting that publication. So especially for planners and getting published, it tells planners that, hey, I can shoot editorially and I'm comfortable doing that. And for us, it's kind of like a win, as you know, because planners do bring us work. So getting published is also great for those vendor relationships because that really does help planner bring more work and more weddings to you. Because for planners too, it's so important for them to be published because they're the ones that create the design. So for them, I feel like that's even more important for them too.
Yeah, no, totally. No, totally. I've had a few weddings where I've showed up and I email the vendors before the wedding and say, hey, like, I'm going to be giving you all the photos and we're going to try and get featured just so they know. But oftentimes they don't read that email. And so on wedding day, when you're like shaking hands and they're meeting you and they're like, hey, I'm Susie, or hey, I'm Bill, or whatever. I've had these experiences where we're going back to talking about getting in that mindset as a photographer. They've kind of like swarmed me and been like, hey, so we're really hoping to get this featured. And so make sure you pay attention to our cocktail, hot dogs that we're serving. And we think they're really cute. And I'm like, like I try to feature every wedding and I'm going to do my best. But a lot of times too, some of my couples are, especially in DC, I have couples where their weddings aren't allowed to be shown, like NDA life. And so I'm like, hey, this we'll do our best.
Yeah, and that's and I love that you brought that up because I really don't like that pressure, and I think it's not good either. So, for example, I never promise any of my brides their wedding will be published, number one, because we can't control it. The editors control it. And if they're looking for a very specific, they need to obviously have weddings that are different colors, diversity, same sex. They have to show everything, which makes sense. So for you to get published is it truly is very hard because the editors control that and publishers. So when vendors hey, I want to get this featured, I don't love it. I don't promise anything. And I also don't think that pressure, I think it's okay, but it's not a healthy pressure sometimes either too. Because hey, if I can't get it published, it's not my fault.
Yeah, totally. So,
sorry to cut you, but one thing that I'm also passionate about is I also don't believe, I think getting featured is great for brides and grooms. I think it's a nice thing to see your wedding, but it should not be the goal of your wedding day. Your goal is to marry your best friend, for you to spend time with the people you love. It should not be to impress editors, period.
Yeah. So do they, for somebody who's trying to get into featuring and maybe they don't know even the basic premise of featuring, how would they know what outlets to even research, or how would they even know what they need to what are the outlets looking for? How would they know how to start?
So what I tell my couples that some brides that do want to get published, I think the first one, you really do, if you're not creative, you do have to have a planner that's full design. There's no way around it. So I think creativity is number one, because editors really are looking for new and unique. So if something has been pinned 1,000 times, that's not new. So you have to think a mindset. The mindset of the editor is to inspire their readers. So they really want fashion forward and trend setting. So you do need to have those aspects in your wedding if you do want to get published. And I think hiring a planner is such a good idea because they have the eye for that design.
Yeah, I meant ironically, but that's all good advice. I mean, for the photographer, how do they know where to even look for? Yeah.
For us, when it comes to getting featured, how to think like that?
Yeah, but also even just okay, I want to get featured. What outlet do I reach out to, or how will they even know what to look for?
So when it comes to getting featured, you kind of always want to find a good fit for your wedding. So it just takes a lot, and maybe for photographers who've never been featured, it definitely is a little bit overwhelming. Where do I start? What outlets? There really is not it's interesting because I don't think there is a lot of material out there, which is why I wrote this course on how to get published, because nobody really talks about it openly, and it kind of is hush hush in some ways. But it really just starts with curating the gallery. And I think starting with local publications is a great idea. And then other places like Too Bright Lights and Matchology do help. I don't know if you've heard of those too. They
only
do. So
Matchology have I heard of, but not or I've only heard of Too Bright Lights, but not Matchology. That's awesome.
So Matchology, apparently you upload the gallery and they kind of match and they kind of submit to different blogs. I think that's what it is. But I think those two are great, Matchology and Too Bright Lights. They're great to start, but they don't have bigger publications. So you kind of want to start with them and then move on to maybe national and niche publications after that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I guess too, photographers could always look at, maybe where local heroes in their business or in their area are being featured as well for the local and niche blogs as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So really, really cool. I'm trying to think if there's anything other fun submission stuff we haven't covered yet. Can you think of anything that photographers might need to know when it comes to getting featured?
Yeah, so we kind of talked about some mistakes people make about curating the gallery, and we talked about the write up, how it should be organized to the point, and like why it's apart. But then I think another mistake that photographers make when it comes to getting featured is, which is a mistake that I actually make. I feel like you've probably noticed this. Finer photographers shoot we shoot portrait orientation a lot. So editors want to see both orientations. So you should have a good mix of like portrait and landscape. And you also want to have a good mix of like far away and pictures that fill the frame, because they need both to make that layout. So for me, I am so bad about shooting landscape, which is something that I've kind of had to grow this year.
That is hilarious. I'm the opposite.
Exactly.
There's like 10 photos in my entire, 1,000 picture gallery that are going to be portrait. Me. And they're all, I've gotten better at it because I'm like, because when people started ordering prints or you start to do an album design, that's when you realize you're like, oh, this is what I want. And so like family formals, I'll try and do a few like portraits, landscape, or portraits and landscapes. And then details, ironically, are where I'm like, oh, this would be really cool, like on the cover or for an ad or for Instagram story or something like that. So it's like trying to shoot with the end in mind is, something good for all photographers. Like, how will this work later on in life? Even just something we just went through, again, we mentioned this like big print sale and shooting with a little extra room on the edges because clients want to order 8x10s and you're like, oh, that cuts off some stuff. Like,
I know.
And I know they already have a frame for 8x10, so I can't switch it to 8x12. So these are random weird photography things, but I'm like, that's super good to know. That's awesome.
It is. And it's something that I have to grow too, because like I'm the opposite from you. I'm like all portrait. And then so now I'm like, okay, Liz, turn this camera around. Not only, like you said, for the couple, because they also want to print pictures out and they want to use different frames for the album layout. But then also, like, if you're trying to get your work submitted, you want to have a good mix of both, because editors are looking, maybe they want that full bleed, or maybe they want to cover both pages and they can't find any of your pictures that are landscape. It's, you want to have a good mix for them to have lots of options.
Yeah, totally. And that makes sure that your couples get a lot of variety as well, too. So
exactly.
It's like shooting, as long as you make sure you're, whatever your clients and your thing is, like, as long as you're doing that. And if you shoot anything extra where you're like, oh, this will get published or this will look cool, or like whenever I have a second photographer, I never ask them to take photos of me, but they do just in general. Yeah. And, like, I'm not going to tell them not to. I'm like, whatever. If we see something cool that looks good and, it doesn't make me feel terrible, I'll use it for something. So it's not going to hurt to have a little bit of extra.
It never hurts to have a little extra. That's a good way to put it.
That's awesome. So now you're releasing a course on like submissions and how to get published. Other than that, like, what are you hoping for in 2019? Like, what are your next goals? You've been featured like everywhere. So like, what are some 2019 goals that Elizabeth is really passionate about? Like,
that's such a good question. I think some of our goals so we're launching this course on January 7th. So we're really excited with that. That's like our biggest goal of 2019. So it's going to be an open closed course. So it's not going to be always open. So we're going to try and launch it 2 or 3 times a year in terms of this course, and just trying to get like more of my education side, just focus on that a little bit more for 2019. But I think one of my big goals also, just not personal or business, is to like, it is so hard working from home and shutting it off. So like, I'm just trying to create, like, I think besides that, professional goals, which are great to have, just like having boundaries for my business and be able to like not live to work, but like work to live. So I think that's been like on my mind lately.
I love that. Do you work all from home, or do you have a studio space at all or anything like that?
I work all from home. It's me and Oodles.
That's awesome. And then do you do, this is getting in nitty gritty, but just for fun,
do
you do client, the kind of meeting with your client? Do you do that in person or on the phone or both?
So usually on the phone. So a lot of my clients also are like, my brides are busy or they're out of state. So usually it's phone, either FaceTime or just a phone call. I think it's the easiest. And then after that, if they still want to meet up, I usually meet up. But honestly, it's all phone. I love that.
This year I kind of got like attracted to the idea of having a studio space, and I was like, oh yeah, it'd be so cool. And one, I realized that I don't really need it, or at least right now, which I know is sad, because like wedding photographers, we don't shoot in a studio that often, and if you have a window, you have a place you could shoot something. But then also for client meetings, I was like, oh, it'd be really, really cool, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, similar to you, living in DC, all of our couples either live in DC or they don't live in DC.
Exactly.
And it's difficult for them to like want to meet in person. And I'm always like trying to strike when the iron is hot. So like they email me, I'm like, let's meet today.
Wow. Good for you. Do I like meeting? Yes. But honestly, I've had, after and you know how time consuming they are. So you lose like at least 4 hours every day. And if that couple doesn't book, like that means I've lost time working for my own couples who have paid and writing my courses, which I love. So I do shoot for the phone, like very heavily, or FaceTime.
Yeah, 100%. That's one thing. It's like, it's so sad to go into a meeting and even if you feel like it goes well and then they're like, no, and you're like, why did I waste 2 to 4 hours of this happening? And it's one of those things where it's always hard to tell. And so, yeah, like having a phone call, or having like I know a lot of photographers now they're not like just giving away all their pricing, but they're kind of like, hey, here's kind of like a pricing and about me page that they're using when a client inquires. And what I'm hearing is that it helps unwaste a lot of that time. It's like, all right, do you want to call at the end of that page? And most of the people by that time, they're like, all right, I'm ready. Like, I already know how much you cost. I know what your vibe is. But it comes for a long time, like you want a salted caramel, you want a pumpkin spice latte or salted caramel mocha, you're going to Starbucks because that's like, they make that and that's what you want. Whereas some brides, or some couples, especially in DC, like they don't know what they want yet. So it might not be their vibe, but that's really cool. That's awesome. We'll definitely have to link the course in there and it'll be super cool. Awesome. Where can other people go to find out more about you and find out more about Gavin and Oodles and like see your work? Cause I think it's really cool. It's really classy, which is really good in DC. But you're also really fun. So I feel like a lot of classy photographers aren't as fun as you. So
thanks, Adam. That means a lot. I try. I have a lot of cheesy jokes, but I try to keep it fun for my clients.
Yeah, maybe it's the Brazilian vibe or something like that.
It is. I think that helps. And then Gavin's also super fun. So he's like the people person. So I feel like we're a good team.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So where can people go to find you guys? Like, what's your Instagram handles and where's the best place to find out about the course when it comes out?
Yeah, so the best place so my Instagram handle is Liz Fogarty, and that's the best way to find out about the course. And we have my profile link on my Instagram has a link to my newsletter. And so the newsletter is where I'm going to send information about the course and like promo for the first like people that buy the course when it does launch. So signing up for my newsletter on my link on my Instagram account is the easiest thing. And then to see more of my work, it's just my website, which is elizabethfogartyphotography.com.
That's awesome. Seriously. Thank you so much for coming on. It was good to have like a DC buddy on. Thank you so much, Liz.
Thank you so much, Adam, for having me. Can I have one question for you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I saw that you are doing these mentorships, and I think that's such a good idea. I think a lot of photographers need them, and I just wanted to hear like, how is it going? Like, how do you like it? How do photographers like it? So how's like the whole mentorship going for you? Like that you offer to photographers?
Yeah. So what happened for us is over the past few years, I love education. I love learning, so I've also wanted to teach. And I think for me, the idea of this podcast and everything that I do is helping people become a better version of who they are and who they want to be. And for me, I decided this year we kind of like actually wrote it down and organized. And the podcast was originally just a passion project, but we decided that is going to be, that's the free tier of all of our education. And, we're at 70 episodes now and we're cooking, like we're putting out content. And so the podcast is like our free, all access, like, hey, you can learn as much as you want.
That's smart.
And then we've got one-on-one mentorship, which is kind of like, hey, Adam, I just want to meet with you about SEO. Like, I just want to dive in on this thing. Like, that's something I'm really passionate about. Or they're like, the biggest thing, ironically, I've met with one-on-one for people is one, like just getting more leads and more bookings, and then off-camera flash for receptions. They're like,
that's huge. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I want to make it look cool and fun. And maybe they've seen some of my work. And so that's gone really, really well. It's kind of intense because I send like a big questionnaire for them and I'm like, how much money did you make? How much money do you want to make? Like I ask everything. And then for long-term mentorship, we've just launched that, or it's going to start in January, and we have a few people signed up and we're excited. It's going to be intense as well. Like we have 10 education modules throughout the year that we're going to go into. But it's kind of like now it's very similar to like discipleship. Like it's my goal to make sure that they're awesome by the end of the year. Like they might be really good at shooting, but maybe they're bad at business, or they're good at business, but bad at shooting. And I want to kind of level them up in every little space that I can. And so it's been really exciting. And I think we're really pumped about it.
No, that's awesome. Congratulations. I'm really excited for you when it comes to that.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Liz.
Thank you so much for having me, Adam. Have a good rest of your fall season.
Always fun to chat with Liz. She is just I don't have like the words to describe her. She's just really cool. She's just doing a lot in her business, and I love that. I love when people are like hustling on all levels, and they're like, yeah, I'm shooting, but I'm also trying to get an education. And like her husband Gavin is, EMT firefighter vibe, so really cool. And she's from DC, so we got to rep our DC squad, if you will. Really, really, really cool. One word of note for you guys, and again, we're trying to do this like one call to action, so it doesn't feel like you guys have to do everything at the end of the episode. I would love for you guys to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I know you hear that every week from every podcast, but guys, it's free, and it really, really does help all the podcasts. If you just leave a review, like put 5 stars in there and just write, this episode was good, or this podcast is awesome. Like, you can write whatever you want. 1, I would love to read them and feature them, and it would mean a lot to us. But 2, it's just really great. It really, really does help the podcast just get more eyes and ears. And so really, really thankful for that. Guys, have a wonderful day. Keep being awesome.